Hey, hey, hey. It's John Selway, and I'm gonna sing a song for you. How many of you are old enough to know what that reference is? Yes, it's Singing Selway's Saturdays today. No, really. I do like to sing. Shh, it's a secret. I don't do it much in public. I can't believe I just said that. Secret's out. Who was first today? Alessandro Braz, what up? Luminous Cloud is here, as ever. He's hoping that I'm using the push 3 today. We have the push 3 here. I've been, well-intentioned. I just haven't had a lot of time to really dig in and get to know it well enough to feel comfortable playing with it in front of you guys. There's all these other people doing videos and they go into great detail and they're, I guess they have more time than I do. I will eventually make the time because the plan was to do something with the push 3. So yes, be patient. It'll happen. I promise. Conditionally promise. What's up, Mike Harding? Got some good questions in there asking about collaborating. We can talk about that a little bit. Yes, indeed. Live Society is back. Luminous Cloud got it. Fat Albert. Totally not PC anymore. But I always liked that song when I was a little kid. A very little kid in the 70s, early 80s. What's up, DJ Feo? Techno today, not too raw though, a little bit musical actually. We'll see how it goes. Thank you, Marcus Shogu. Glad you liked the intro song. Should I put it on my Bandcamp? It's unreleased. Jan Kalinowski is here. Skromantis is back. What's up? Yes, we're Techno heads today. Ninja Techno. VJ Flick. What's up? Good to have you. And Vivian Sutherland. Hey, yes. I love it. We're talking about this dark, crazy intro track, and I'm talking about singing, and I'm like, I don't think this one would do. I don't know if I'd sing over this one. Something else, perhaps. And yes, Live Society's got his jam working with Live 11. Fantastic. Right. Let's get into it. Let's start doing some things. Welcome, everybody, to another Selway Techno Saturday here on 343 TV. Where is it? There it is. I gotta get my, where am I in this camera? Brought to you by 343 Labs Music Production School here in New York City, Berlin, and globally online. Why am I doing my big deep voice today? I don't know. It's one of those days. I'm feeling a little bit goofy. I hope that's okay with you. As you know, those of you who are regular viewers, you hear me say this every time, but 343 Labs, we do music production classes, we do mixing and mastering, we do music theory and composition and arranging, we do synthesis and sound design. We got a live performance course. We have our 1-year program, which has just gotten started this month, and it is going well. Things are rolling along. We got lots of classes going on. It's been so busy here. In the last couple of weeks, today is actually relatively quiet. It's like I'm the only one here right now. That's going to change probably real shortly. People are going to come in and start making some noise and getting into their classes and getting into their lab times. And lab times. We have times for students to come in between classes and use the classrooms, use the gear we have. We have mentorship sessions, which is my favorite part, actually. I've got a new sort of beginner techno student that she's really excited to get in and learn about, moving beyond DJing and making some techno, and we were meeting in our mentorship session and talking about tracks that we liked, and we got into some basic, just talking about some basic ideas to get started, similar to what happens here on the stream, right? And similar to what I do in the online 6 class making techno course, just kind of geared towards beginners to get their feet wet and get into making techno. So if you want to know more about that, you know what to do. There's that thing below the video that we put words into and links. And if you scroll down with your mouse or your trackpad, or you're on your phone and you swipe and there's these words and then there's the links. I think they're called hyperlinks. What am I doing? I told you I was feeling goofy today. You know what to do. visit our websites. We got one for New York and we got one for Berlin for all the in-person stuff and all the information you need to know about our online courses and our year program, which, we're still signing people up for the next cohort of our year program for January 2024. So come and check that out if you're thinking about diving in. And that's it. That's my due diligence. Let's see what you guys are talking about in the chat. Vivian's asking, make some Miami bass. I'm good with the Miami bass beats for sure. I'd need someone that, like, as far as like the vocal element of that, I feel like I need some samples. It's not that was sort of not my vocal style, but yeah, I need to collaborate on that. But the beats I definitely got, right? One of these days on an Electro Saturday, we could do some kind of Miami style stuff. I love that. And also just the whole sorry, something just fell on my keyboard. The whole electro scene in Miami has always been amazing. From like the bass music to more experimental and IDM stuff. And there's always been really good music down there. So that would be cool to explore. Some of you might remember we had Danny Days on as a guest a little while back, and he's from Miami, and he's great. Like, he's a good DJ, and he makes different styles of music, but he definitely reps the electro for sure. So, nice guy to know. Hey, Mundulator. Mundulator's asking about Synplant 2. I'm sure many of you have been seeing all of the videos and the social media popping up about this latest update for Synplant, which is, amazing, actually. I literally just installed it. I have it here. So, not completely random, right, that you should ask about that. I mean, Synplant's been around for years. It's always been a really interesting, unusual, inspiring interface for a synth for me. It just has something kind of cool and different about it. I think, though, the biggest news is this Genopatch thing. Again, I've just been watching videos about this. I've known this was coming. There's been some things, sort of previews about this for a while, but basically it's whether, it's algorithmic or AI or whatever it is, but they've got a way to analyze samples and then get the internal synth to recreate the sound. It's pretty amazing. Again, I just literally installed this. I have it here because let's take a look at it. And maybe we'll play with it a little bit. I literally haven't even tried this new feature yet. Like, I was just watching videos about it this morning. So yeah, that's a good thing to think about maybe today. Like, what if I can come up with a new part for the track that I'm working on today using this? And yes, Live Society, it was always crazy and creative. And Luminous Cloud, yes, it's bananas. Synplant is bananas. It's always been bananas. Bananas. So, right. Now, what are we doing today? The aforementioned new mentee I have, one of our year program students who's a beginner to producing and really was into techno. Sometimes when I work with students, we're just sketching ideas out. So occasionally they kind of come together and I turn it into something. So this is like what I have here today to get started with is literally, came from a lesson, just working with a student and, talking about just some basics of sounds. And, this student has been more comfortable working with samples and loops. And that's where a lot of people start. You can get your samples out of the library and put loops together and kind of construct things that way. So we started talking about, a little bit more, not fully sound design oriented, but the way I think about making techno, where tweaking the sounds and finding the sounds and tweaking the sounds and playing with the sounds is where is part of where the composition is, right? So yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. But before we do, let's look at a couple more questions. This is a good one. Silver Knobs, what's up? Nice to have you back again. Silver Knobs is wondering about feedback sessions that would, challenges. Yeah, we were joking around about the banjo challenge last time, right? I think that's a really good idea. Like, I also know there were some posts on the Discord. I forgot to mention the Discord. Join our Discord, link below, especially if you want to be involved in our occasional feedback sessions. Someone asked if there's going to be another techno one. We're going to do an electro one and a techno one, before the end of the year, for sure. Next one will be techno, because the last time we did electro, and then we'll do, maybe an electro one. We'll squeeze one in hopefully before the end of the year. So yes, feedback sessions and challenges I think is great. Like the no pad challenge, the no bass techno, no kick techno. I mean, yeah, whatever it is, like it's totally arbitrary, right? Like it doesn't have to be super hard, but like it's an exercise in creating within limits. That's always a good thing, right? So yeah, I like that idea, Silver Knobs. We'll see if we can set that up. That's a good one. And then, what do we got? Vivian Sutherland is very enthusiastic about the idea of acoustic electro. And I've sort of touched on that a little bit before. I like organic sounds, things that sound more like real world sounds and very synthetic sounds, but there's like a world between there. And can you even make a music called electro that's supposed to be super electronic sounding with sounds that are acoustic or organic? And I think yes, like there's something that you can do it. And it's kind of, with electro beats, if you start using like regular acoustic drum kits, it just starts sounding like, drum breaks. It sounds like break beats. So like, where's the line? That's an interesting place to explore. How organic and acoustic can you get and still be electro? I think it can be done. So I feel like that's a fairly advanced challenge in a way, but we'll see. Good ideas, all of you. Yes, physical modeling, sure. Skermantis is asking about the banjo battle. You need to play a big sample in reverse and create a transition. Yes, I'm going to go back to that track, right? I mentioned that, it's good, and I like to do this sometimes where I like keep coming back to the same project, and you guys can see how it develops. So yes, we will go back to that. And so I haven't even gotten to the arranging in that one yet. That's still just playing around. And that's kind of where we are with this one too, right? So let's see what we have to listen to now that we've been talking for a little while. Let's make some noise. And I mentioned that this sort of came out of a sketch of just talking to a student and looking at some ideas. And for the most part, just using live devices too. So like as an Ableton Live beginner student, they're mostly focusing on how to use the native devices rather than going into like all of the complexities and the myriad choices of opening up to like audio units and VSTs and stuff like that. But, so it all started with the kick drum and just the idea of building up a drum rack. But, I started with these, we use these all the time, these the drum synth devices in live. And I always like the DS kick. It's like as a 909 like or 808 like kick or somewhere in between. It's got just enough controls, and it's got, because it's an oscillator, right? It's constantly changing slightly. Even when you use the phase retrigger, right? You get a little bit more of a pop on the transient with the phase retrigger button. It's starting the waveform over at the same position every time. But even then, there's still a little tiny bit of drift. So it's got that kind of evolution in the sound that even on a small level, like one drum, it can make a big difference overall. It all adds up. Nice. Okay. And then started with that. And then the next sort of idea was using a synthetic percussion sound as like more than just a percussion sound. So, we have this little clang, DS clang, which is basically doing like cowbells, like electronic cowbell sound. And with the filter delay on there, I mean, that's literally like the default, almost just the default. I think I adjusted some levels in the filters a little bit, but and then again, nothing new, but thinking of this from a beginner's perspective, like just making sure from the beginning you have the concept of a sound that you can play with and it's evolving. And that, and sometimes some styles of techno, that could be most of your track right there, depending on how you play it. So simple stuff, but I also like that there's this little, it's called a clave, and when you tune it up higher, it sounds like a clave, but now it sounds like, I don't know. a sort of a different variation. Those two layers on it's like an 808 cowbell because you can hear the different tune, the notes from the high and the low pitches. We can tune it. Right. All these things that we can play with and automate. And I always like to I'll build up a drum kit while I'm writing the song. So like, what's the next thing I want to hear in my arrangement? Okay, probably a hi-hat. Let's get rid of that clave layer. Could probably bring that in as an using automation as an arrangement element later on. And then, okay, more hi-hats. Right, already just playing with the sounds and it's like jamming around. More sub, a little more decay on that kick drum. Well, that might be a little overwhelming, so let's dial back that clang again. Make it more like a short percussion sound mixed in with the hi-hats. We talked about layers of, different frequency layers for different sounds, like brighter versus darker, and how they interact together. But then I thought about, what next? What else could I use? And this is most of what we covered in our little bit of a lesson. And I took this home, and I thought, what else do I want to do? And I started going through some chord stabs. And this was another idea of like not getting too fussy about designing all your sounds. So there's on the one side, you're looking for sounds that you can play with. So whether it's samples plus effects or a synth or something where you can tweak around. But also just to come up with interesting rhythmic patterns with different types of sounds that aren't just drums. And so, I went through and found some little chord stabs and things. And we were checking out, this isn't exactly hard groove kind of techno, but that's one of the things we talked about is how do you make these kind of funky syncopated grooves with the hard groove stuff. And, there's a lot of chopped up samples and, layered drum loops and things like that. I kind of went more in the direction of, I like it when you do those little like sequences of call and response chord stabs and things like that. Let's see. So I started looking just for some other strange percussion sounds. Like I found this little, these are all literally out of the live library. Like this is all stuff you could, like, if you own the suite, most of these sounds you could get for free just from the packs, right? Just going through and randomly picking stuff that caught my ear. And I like that. It's kind of like a synthy percussion sound. Nothing too complicated. Talked about the idea of like, again, not a new concept to all of you, but easily finding interesting patterns by choosing notes that are not quarter notes, right? So just add in a syncopated, just like a one shot syncopated thing. So even just that. And that's not going to be the full pattern because then I'm going to add in other sounds that call and response with that. Let's go back to the original idea. And then found this kind of dark, filtery chord. And that's actually, I think that was, it's from a loop. I put it in the simpler and put it in slice mode, and I just almost randomly just hit a couple different notes to get a subtle variation. And, you could do this in a more complex way. You could load up a synth and play a chord and automate the filter or whatever parameters, but this is faster, right? And it's sort of taking a loop and deconstructing it into something new. I'm not done with this yet. Like this probably could use a little sound shaping, filtering. Actually, I did put a filter on it because it's less bright. Effects, mixing, things like that. This is interesting. All right, Daubsky. Welcome, Daubsky. I think that's a new name for us. Kick 2 is your go-to. But then Marcus is saying, can't handle it too many controls. So yeah, kick 2 is great. It's more powerful than something like the DS kick because it's got multiple layers and more complex envelopes. And it's really good if you want to get into deep sound design for kicks. But, I don't think you necessarily need that for this style of techno. I feel like a little more raw and simplified is it makes sense. And, again, this kick is more like what you'd get straight out of a 909 or other similar analog drum machine. Kick 2 is going to give you more power. The D16 kick drum synthesizer is also really great in terms of more. We've used this on the stream before, but let's see if I can. Where did it go? I swear I have it. Punchbox, right? Yeah, Punchbox is like definitely a lot. I imagine Marcus would be also a little bit overwhelmed because it's a lot, but it sounds really good. Hey, Kev Human, how's it going? Nice to have you. Noah Pred should come back. He's a regular. And full disclosure, he's also a 343 Labs instructor. So we like to, whenever he's doing something new with his Manifest Audio project, we have him on to talk about it because we like him. And so yeah, he's part of the crew. He will definitely be back. Yeah, I saw he's got some new devices that are it's sonification of data. So interesting. Another way of kind of, it's not random, but like you're finding patterns in numbers and making music out of it. I think that's great. So hey, Element, wouldn't mind them making a new Punchbox. I feel like I don't love the interface of Punchbox. I would like it to be a little bit more. I don't know. It's what's it? Is it skeuomorphic or is the design where you're making it look like it's hardware, but it's not? That kind of thing. I'm not as into that kind of interface as I am like a design that's meant like a user interface that's meant for a computer screen, right? Rather than looking like knobs and buttons on a hardware. But that doesn't stop me from using their plugins. I still like them. Life Society says steampunk. Yeah, it could be it'd be nice if it was a little more slick and modern, even with the knobs and buttons and 3D elements and things like that. All right, so let's get back to the groove. But just to kind of let's go back to just the kick drum here for a second. And the important thing for me with these elements that I'm adding, these sort of more chord-like or synth-like elements that are still rhythmic on top of what the basic drum groove is doing, although already the basic drum groove is more than that because it's got that synthy note from the metallic sound, right? That's a little bit more like a lead element for a techno track. So there's some crossover. But these guys, I'm consciously trying to make a call and response where there's this, it's all a bunch of individual notes and sounds that add up into a more complex rhythmic groove. So they're kind of going back and forth. So you can kind of see, if I select both of those MIDI clips, you can see how those two clips interrelate to each other. Two different sounds creating a melody. And then we added this one. Okay, that's like this is just a drum loop. So that, that's just the one example that we came up with in the lesson where you just find an interesting drum loop and throw it in there with your other drums. Like, I'll get this question, like people will be in class and say, hey, is it cool if I like use drum loops and program drum beats and put them together? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Please do that. Like, do your kick, do your snare, do your hi-hat, do your basic beat, and then experiment with layering other types of rhythms together. It's also kind of inspiring to do it that way, because if you're still learning how to get the right kind of sounds and do the detailed drum program, you can make a drum kit, like a MIDI drum kit, sound like a real drummer with the right sounds, or have even if it's electronic, you can have the expression of like an intricate drum groove played by a human by velocity and tonal like manipulation and things like that. But if you're a beginner, that's daunting. So, you can find an interesting like percussion loop or funk loop or whatever, and then layer that with your own beat. And that's kind of exciting because it sounds more polished and more complex, just like that. So this was just another little kind of percussion loop that I was going to use more of it, but I ended up just using 1/4 note of it. It has this little snare in there. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the backbeat or not. That's always a thing for me. Like with techno, we've talked about this before, whether I want the snare to 2 and the 4, and I'm sure that some of you out there have opinions about this. Also, this is a very like kind of a tight acoustic sounding snare. I kind of want something noisier maybe if I do use a snare. So I ended up just doing this. All right, another chord stab ended up coming in, and this one's a little more sustained and moody. I was trying to balance this like syncopated, sharp energy with something deeper and smoother as a contrast. So it's a little bit organ-like, and it's slightly housey. I acknowledge that, but this is another thing we've talked about before. I like when techno has house in it and house has techno in it, but I'm not necessarily saying tech house either. Like that's as a genre with quotes around it. I just mean there's always cool, interesting elements of different genres mixed together, and this one works for me. Maybe. It does get a little moody. Elements mentioning how what's amazing about Ableton going through a loop folder while the track is playing and previewing it seamlessly. Like that's another thing I like to encourage people to do is don't hit I'm hitting stop because I'm talking to you and like making a point. But a lot of times when I make music and I'm not like streaming and I'm just in the zone, I don't even hit the space bar. I just let it play. If I'm trying to get that hypnotic groove going and I want to get into that groove, and I just don't stop unless I absolutely have to. So like, you know, wrong loop, but that's the idea, right? I don't even think you guys can hear that. Let's make sure you can hear that. I don't mind that, actually. You know, shakers almost always work somehow. Hey, Aaron, what's up? Controversial or uncontroversial opinion. Tech house as a genre used to be great until the EDM kiddies in the US took over the genre. It wasn't just the US. I think it's global. I would put some blame on the UK and Europe and everywhere. It's just the genre of... I blame Beatport. Not to completely knock Beatport. You know, they're just responding to the market. But like... you know, the Beatport Tech House section definitely changed things at a certain point. But yeah, deep, early Tech House, totally cool with that. All right. I don't know, just because I kind of didn't mind that shaker loop, and we were talking about how easy it is to just throw in a loop and just keep going. Just gonna throw it in there, and we can always get rid of it later if we don't love it. All right. I also hear a lot of times, and again, this wasn't meant to be hard groove. It isn't quite yet. If it is, I have to like make it more tough and chunky probably and do some different kinds of beats. But part of the concept of that was like finding little vocal chops and little chord stabs and things. And so this is another, and I like having vocals that don't repeat too much, that just kind of come in subtly a little bit. I do have one that's sort of repeating. It's like a little grunt. And it's filtered so you can barely tell what it is. And again, it's still fitting in with that syncopated call and response. So they're all adding up to create a complete phrase. Everything's got its own little spot in the pocket, in that kind of syncopated pocket, along with the kick drum. Hey, what's up? Eli Groove Tiger, Kev Human, James Hype has much to answer for. You're talking about Tech House, right? Koa Music, that's another new name. Welcome. I considered Timo Ma's Tech House 20 years ago. Now it sounds like the same groovy bass line. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there was more of a... I think like Tech House sort of solidified into more of a slightly commercial genre over the decades, but it was always there, and there were different flavors of it, more or less techno or whatever. Timo Mas did some good stuff. All right, getting back into the pocket. I want my hi-hats back. So I'm doing this, and I'm getting this groove going. And And I'm like, all right, I like that big boomy kick drum, but it still doesn't have like a heavy bass thing. It's sort of hollow sounding, and maybe that's how I've mixed the kick. So I decided to go in and create a bass line on, you know, a thick, subby sort of sound, fast 16th notes, to give it some weight. And I'm not 100% stuck on this bass yet, like, but it serves the purpose. You know, it's probably okay. I feel like maybe that chord stab, that filtered one, needs some effects or something. It's all still pretty dry. We'll work on that. Let's lose that shaker for a second. It's kind of it's actually a nice frequency range that it fits into. Let's lose that deeper organ kind of chord stab for a second. Every now and then, like a reverb throw on a chord stab, that always works, right? I'll definitely do that or something like that in the arrangement, or maybe find another chord stab that complements those, that has a big reverb on it that jumps out every time. Like I kind of did. And this was another thing that, with my student, where we were listening to hard groove stuff, and we noticed there were a bunch of, especially classic, but still some new ones, that there's a lot of horn stabs in hard grooves. Anybody notice that? We were listening to some old Player tracks from the 90s and the new stuff that's sort of similar to that, but modern and a little faster, because a lot of the stuff is fast now. Like I'm doing this one at 139. Let's see. I was like, I just typed horn stab to see what would come up in my library, because I don't think I have a lot of horn stabs, but we had that, which is very classic, like soul funk, you know, 60s, 70s, right? And that you'd hear, right? So I just decided to use it, and it's okay. It's got like the record crackle in it, and it's very vintage sounding. So I wanted to figure out how to make it sound a little fuller. But just starting with this. And you can see it's not happening every bar or anything. I've got a long, I've got a 16 bar pattern or loop, and it just comes in every now and then with a big reverb on it. And it's a little cheesy, I acknowledge, but I like that kind of cheese. But I wanted it to be a little more shiny and polished, and so I decided to do some pitch shifting to create a more complex chord. So just using live grain delay, because again, one of the sort of things about this lesson, we were limiting ourselves just to live devices. And, you know, this is something I did on my own later, right? I threw the chord stab in there when I was demonstrating to the student, but then I was like, I wanted to polish this up. This is a little bit more advanced audio effect and sound design than I think the student is ready for. But it's still cool. So let's look at it. So I've got, I'm just stacking that up using the grain delay to do some pitch shifting. And it's also giving a little stereo imaging. So there's like you know what, let's make this easier to play. I'm going to go ahead and, right. So it's tuned down. There's a million ways I could have done this. I could have thrown this into a sampler and played a chord. Right. It's over complex in a way, but it's the process, right? It led me in a particular direction and I went with it. So there's one that's tuned down, minor third, and then a fourth or 5 semitones, and then all together, right? It's just making a big, thicker, more rich harmony. And I thought that sounded better, right? And there's a lot of reverb on it, but I like it. So let's see. How does that sound all together? I've got it. All right, we've got a technical issue. Let's see if we can figure it out. Stereo decor. John, can you please switch off that solo button on the master? The sound is doubling in an unpleasant way. Well, I'm sorry about that. Normally, it shouldn't be doing that. All right. I know what happened. I know exactly what happened. I think when I changed the Q output, I meant to change the Q output, and I set the master out to the wrong. I did the wrong output. It should. Let me know if it's fixed now. Let me know if you hear any doubling anymore. Is that doubling? Give me a thumbs up in the chat if it sounds okay. No doubling now. Yeah. So thanks for pointing that out. That was me being dumb. That was I meant to put the Q out to tracks 5 and 6, and I put the master out to 5 and 6. And the way I have this, you don't need to know this, but I have this custom rack where I have one output going over the main outputs to my speakers, and then the stream is getting a separate output, and this one's not mixed in with what I couldn't even hear the doubling, right? So you can see that's what happened, is that I sent the signal twice. So c'est la vie. We figured it out and we fixed it. Nice. All right. We got the big chord stab in there. And it kind of gives it like a positive vibe, which at first I was like, do I want that? Do I want it to be like happy sounding? And you know what? Yes, because so much techno is dark and serious, and I love that, and I do it myself. But I think it's good to you need a light and dark side of the force, right? So this was the light side, and I'm thinking, all right, let it be that. I think a hard groove style kind of syncopated thing with the chords is what started it going that way. And then having that big kind of positive sounding horn stab on top of it really takes it there. So it's more or less, it's techno, but it's like a slightly different flavor, right? Than if I were to keep it darker. So I seem to be going in this kind of harmonic direction with this groove. It's got, if I strip it down again, all right, I could take this in a totally different direction. Let's get rid of all the happy sounding stuff or the more positive vibe stuff, right? This is more neutral. Right, that's more like, I could make this go in a darker direction now. And if I just sort of play around with the clang sound and just keep it more stripped down. Oh, I forgot. I also have this little random vocal sample that I threw in with some delay on it. Just to occasionally throw in some human element there. Simply nice. Yes, add some bass with the kick. All right, so again, this isn't a finished mix yet, and there is a lot of bass. There is a lot of bass. If you look at my, if we check out what's going on in the spectrum here, like that's a lot of low end right there. Could there be more? Maybe. And there's a lot of sub in this sound. So yeah, I'm going to work all that out in the mix. I was even playing around before with right, that's not helping. I don't know. Do you guys use this instrument, this bass Max for Live device in live? I feel like it's kind of not commonly used. I don't know. But one thing I do know is that it has a really thick compressed sound. I mean, look how there's distortion built into it. But everything that comes out of this thing, it doesn't sound particularly dynamic. It sounds like really squashed. And that can be good, that can be bad. All right, so, there's some work here to be done in the balance of this. I haven't done any side chaining. I haven't done any crazy EQ just a little bit, right? Just to kind of get started. And that's all going through. Well, yeah, I guess there is a bunch of processing going on here because there's the EQ and there's the saturation. Could make it really hard if I drive it. Jamie Johnson's asking, where do you get the 808 clang? Yeah, we looked at that earlier in the stream when I was just showing the sort of how from the beginning. This is the DS clang. This is one of the DS drum synths that's included with live. And then we also have this. There's like an extra layer of a clave sound in there. Cool. It's got some little grainy kind of details in there too. Jan Kalinowski says maybe a dark evolving drone, huh? So yeah, it's interesting. We could totally take this basic groove and go in another direction. That's what I was just saying, right? I've got all this happy stuff and the horn stabs. I think there's only one more sound that I was fooling around with that I wasn't sure about. I was just, it started as just demonstrating a really simple like analog lead kind of one note pattern, but then it got weird. I did some weird stuff with the detuning of the unison and looping envelope, and I don't know if this is really working or not. We'll see. It's got this kind of buzzy thing. It's like I was listening to this in the background for a little bit, and I was like, "It's like bees in my ears or something." It's like a cluster of weird robotic insects. And it needs effects. It's really dry. But yeah, again, totally different vibe than doing all those the chord stabs and everything. Nomad James likes the bees. All right, this is interesting. Let's take a breath for a minute. We're already, gosh, I usually do my my break right about halfway. It's already, well, actually, no. What time is it? Yeah, it's already we started at 1:30 and now it's 2:15. So I'm a little bit past the half hour, but normally we do a little break and remind everybody that this is 343 TV, brought to you by 343 Labs Music Production School here in New York City and Berlin, the techno capital of the world. And online, right? We are globally accessible. All of our courses, our year program, our Discord community. And then, yeah, this fun thing I like to do every Saturday where I hang out and talk to you guys and talk about making techno and electro and just, having a fun hour on a Saturday afternoon or an evening or wherever you are, depending on where you are. So lots of nice comments and ideas coming from you guys in the chat. And back to the question, maybe you could focus on mixing kick and bass sometime. From Aaron Hedges. And yeah, I think we could. Most of my streams are most of what I do is when I'm creating stuff, and then occasionally I'll go through and go through a full track or nearly through a full track. So let's just say this, one of these ideas that I sketch out, when it's getting close to completion and we're ready to do a final mix, we'll do that. We'll come back and focus on some details of some elements like that, at least for part of the show, right? I don't know if it should take a whole hour to get your kick and bass right in the mix. But so, maybe if we do like mixing the track down day. And I've actually thought about, I have guests every now and then, right? Last time we had Phil Sing24 from Cultivated Electronics doing the feedback session, but I'm overdue to have some guests to do some production stuff. So it would be cool to bring in someone who's a mixing or mastering engineer to give their perspective, and that could be good to go through some details like that. And I like to do stuff like that with guests too, because I learn also, right? Oh yeah, there's other ways to do this than my habits, right? So it's good for you guys. You can get my perspective and the guest perspective. So good suggestion. Let's see. Are there any of these streams where we were using the Kick 2 from Nomad James? I haven't used the Kick 2 much, really. I have what I need with making my own kick drums with other synths. And everything that Kick 2 does, you can do with a powerful synthesizer. I use Pigment. Any synth that's got really precise envelopes, and you can combine sampled layers and oscillator synthesized layers. I mean, that's essentially what Kick 2 is like a custom synthesizer designed for making kicks. And you can do that with Serum or Massive or Phase Plant or I'm thinking more like modern, synths that have lots of modulation options and combine different types of synthesis together. That's usually, then you can do whatever you want, right? Anything. So Hannes Bieger is a suggestion from Aaron. Yeah, and he's done some stuff for 343 Labs. He's done some master classes for us. He actually came in and he did like a 8 hour all day workshop / live stream, and he definitely knows what he's doing. Cool. Tim Xavier. He's a close pal of mine. I've known Tim forever. I've actually invited Tim to be on. He's been on as just a guest early on when we were doing Techno Friends and just like having conversations, not doing production stuff. I would love to have him come on and talk about mastering for techno, mixing and mastering for techno, because his studio is amazing. If we could just, I need to get one of our 343 guys in Berlin to go over to his studio, set up a camera, set up the live stream, and then we'll do a remote thing from his studio. That for me would be like, I'm all about learning how to do that kind of broadcasting, and I would love to try and do something like that one of these days. So definitely, good suggestion. And hey, Eli Groove Tiger, I just used the 909 kit from Ableton, which is perfectly fine. Those are good, clean samples. You definitely, though, want to process them, right? They're sounding mostly like straight out of the box. And I think a 909 straight out of the box is cool. But to really make it sound like sort of compete in a modern way, you've got to use effects. And it's always been like that. Even when we were just running through our cheap Mackie mixers and overdriving the gain to get saturation and distortion, that's what it needs. It needs harmonic distortion. It needs more, it needs a compressor. It needs some EQ. And then it's got the power of the 909, but enhanced, right? Cool. Oh my gosh. So DJ Simply Nice said, go old school and get Todd Terry on your show. That would be a real challenge. I mean, I know people that know him. I don't know him personally, but that would be a big ask. That he's pretty, he's a legend here in New York. So yes, that's right. Effects are always a must. And Marco Jacobs asked, what synth was that for the bass? Yeah, and I asked you guys, I don't know if anybody replied. Let's look at that again real quick since you asked, right? So the bass synth is a live device that, if you own the suite, it's included. And it's just called bass. It's a really simple, easy to use subtractive synthesizer, and you're just mixing different waveforms together. There's a sub oscillator, and the subtone is going to change it's a subtractive synth. It's not that different from like using a Moog or any other similar kind of analog style synthesizer. And I could have made this sound on almost anything, right? Anything with a sawtooth wave or a square wave. And I think literally it was just, hey, I'm going to throw some bass on there. And I typed in bass because it was in the context of this lesson with a beginner Ableton Live student. Like, just type bass in and see what comes up and throw it in there. I mean, it was kind of like that. Like, don't be afraid to just try it. Don't think too hard about it. Like, imagine what it is I'm looking for. So I want a 909, type 909. I want a bass, type bass, and then preview the sounds. And this is just one of the ones that came up, and I tweaked it a little bit. So not thinking too hard. But yeah, that's the answer, right? The filters, it's got a lot of opportunity to like saturate and distort. That's all it is. I don't want to mess it up. Who knows if I end up keeping this. There's the bees. I was like, that's a little intense. Let's break it up a little bit and make it less repetitive. And I think what was happening with this one, I was trying to make it fit in with the chord stabs because it was so busy. Like, does this buzzy sound even work with the chord stabs? It could work with the noisier things. So I'm trying to fit it in its pocket, right? It just tonally sounds like it belongs in a different track somehow. Oh, the stand is falling. So, but anyway, just to show you what I mean, like when it was continuous like this, it was too much. And then I was like, okay, let's remove some notes. And that fits better rhythmically, but then tonally it still doesn't quite work. So I feel like different track maybe, or different version. That clave, that pitch down clave is like, takes up a lot of space. And we have the other kind of rim shot loop going on. This deeper organ kind of stab. The new shaker we just added today. Whatever that is, whatever they're saying, sounds cool. It's got an echo on it, so it just kind of floats away. We have the horn stab. We've got the hi-hats to play with. This is one of the more recent things I did. It's got the tight hi-hat, increasing the decay to get some more energy. I mean, just that alone is such a good thing to play with in the arrangement. There's that stab. Drop the kick drum out. I've already got enough for an arrangement for sure. I did add one more hi-hat sound. It's kind of a noisy, white noise kind of thing. And just playing around. This is where I was thinking, remember before early on, I was like, the loop had that little snare drum in there, and I wasn't sure if I wanted the 2 and the 4 to be emphasized. This was just a totally random thought, but basically, going back to where it started. Like it's a hi-hat, but pitched down a couple of octaves. Like adding a little bit of a backbeat. So, I mean, I kind of don't mind it. It's like that tight little electronic noise in the back. The problem is, when I open up the filter, it's too much. So I got to figure that one out. Maybe I'll separate them. That would be the easiest solution. So jury's out on that one. There's a little variation with some extra notes. I like this one better, actually. That's really adding a lot of energy. Let's see how that sounds all together. Yeah, I think this is a good vibe to go. I'm feeling it. It's making me move. It's definitely, it's not 100% hard groove, but it's inspired by that. It's somewhere in there. I guess with the chord stabs and the vocal samples and the horns, it kind of makes it more hard groove. It doesn't have the thick, chunky, like Ben Sims drums, though. It doesn't have like that thick drum loops in the middle. I could go that way. Right now, it's sort of more, it's grooving, but it has kind of an open sound to the mix, right? What else? Let's see. Nice. Nomad James, thank you. I've learned so much from these streams. My Push 2 and APC 40 both died the same week, and you taught me how to do more with less. Yeah, I mean, I'm here doing this stream. I'm not using a MIDI controller. I mean, I have a MIDI controller. I'm playing some keys here. Because, we got to look at the synth plant for a few minutes before we run out of time. Right? I was playing around a little bit earlier before we started, like when I opened up the synth plant and landed on that preset. I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice if I want to do some Detroity stuff. But yeah, thanks so much. I'm glad that this has been helpful for you. Simple Sam, hey, he's back. Sounds like Technasia. I love Technasia. Thank you. If it sounds like Technasia, I'm on the right track. Very cool. Aaron says the vocal sample is cool, but sounds slightly out of key. Do you mean, this one? Yeah, I was honestly, I noticed that, but I was kind of leaving it not musically perfectly tuned on purpose, but it could be tuned a little bit. It's tricky with, it's a spoken vocal. It's not a note. You're just getting whatever pitches are in the syllables that got chopped up in there. So yeah, we might revisit that a little bit. And Koa Music had a good suggestion to automate the opening of the filter for tension. That's exactly what I'm going to do. You know, when you hear me like tweaking the sounds and playing around with the sounds as I build the groove, I'm always keeping things in mind to do for the arrangement later. Absolutely. Definitely. All right. Let's see. Here's dry dessert. When do you choose a shaker instead of a short hi-hat? I do both. There's a shaker. We threw randomly. I was just like going through, we were talking about throwing loops in, and this is just straight out of the library, like a real shaker loop, right? Mixed in with that. I mean, that's a little busy. Maybe easier to hear like this. But yeah, I choose a shaker when I want that sort of, shakers have a slower attack, right? Well, or they change, right? Sometimes a shaker can be sharp depending on how you play it. Like if, you could hit a shaker with a stick if you wanted, but it's going so that's the thing about a shaker, is that it's got variation, or real shakers, it's got variation in the articulation. But if I'm going through one shot shaker sounds, I like to layer short, sharp hi-hats and shakers that have a slower attack, because they can complement each other. And you can hear already, like, you got the shaker going shaka 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 shaka, and then that sharp hi-hat accentuates the upbeat, right? This is a unquantized, it's got a groove to it. If I just quantized it to make it more on the 16th notes exactly. And it still has a groove, because you can see each of those little shaker hits are faster or slower, right? So that's what I mean. Like, that's when I choose a shaker, when I want that feel where it kind of isn't as quick and precise. And it has this kind of groove in between the beats because of the articulation. All right. Long answer for a short question. I'm hitting the wrong chords, but this is where I wanted to finally get to. It's just about time to stop. And I guess we're not really giving Simplant the time that it deserves, right? Because there's all these we're going to have to bring Simplant back for a more focused look, because, there are lots of videos out there right now, because it's just been released and everybody's jumping on it, and they're all hyping up this Genopatch thing. But there's plenty of videos and tutorials on the basics of how Simplant works. And, right? I could get into some like Vince Watson, Detroit uplifting, jazzy chord thing. I think that fits this hard groove sort of, funky vibe going on with the chord stabs and the horn stab and everything. So, I don't know. Yeah. So I don't want to rush it. We'll leave it there. This is on my list of things to bring back on the show and keep working on, right? We have a couple of tracks that are on the back burner now. There's the track I was using the weird sounds I made from oh my God, my brain, the Fours device, right? It was Opal or whatever it is. So we were randomly generating sounds and making a track, like a weird track out of that. I have that one I need to finish. Got some electro stuff I need to finish. Now I have this new kind of driving sort of hard groove beat thing, and maybe I'm going to go into this like uplifting chord progression thing. So yeah, we got some fun stuff to do. Thanks everybody for hanging out today. A lot of new names and a lot of interaction in the chat today. Really happy about that. I'm working on getting some more guests in. Probably pretty soon. Gonna have someone on, so I'll announce that when it's confirmed. And we're gonna make some techno. I'm looking for more electro guests. We've got the feedback sessions to organize, and we'll always announce that well ahead of time, so you guys have a chance to get your tracks ready for submission. And that's it. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Adios.